Hello and welcome to the New Mid, everyone. I am so excited to have Jen Bucks here as my guest, she is just amazing. She's a motivational speaker, has written books. She helps politicians write their speeches. She is a philanthropist. Welcome, Jen, to the New Mid.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. This is fun.
Well, I'm excited because you get people to get up out of their seats and really live their best lives. You're this amazing motivational speaker. But before all of that happened, what brought you to this point? What brought you to be a motivational speaker?
I first of all, I was always sort of that kid growing up. I was always the kid that was running from one track event to the next track event and screaming at every finish line and just so enthusiastic. And so literally from the time I was very little, that was always my award. They have like the most improved, the most valuable, and then they have the most inspirational. So I got that every year for every single team I was ever on, and so I think it's just a part of who I am, that I'm really, really genuinely interested in seeing people do well. But what really happened, and the big spark, was when I was a freshman in college, and my mom knew that I wasn't doing well in school. And so she bought us tickets to go to a women's conference, and I dragged my feet. It was the second that had ever been done in history. There were 3,500 women there. And here I was, 18, just, or 19, whatever, right in that pocket, just not wanting to be there, and I remember that the keynote speaker was this older lady, and I was again kind of grumpy, not wanting to be there. And I remember that I turned to my mom and I said, "Who is the old broad?" And my mom said, "Jennifer, that's Joan Rivers." And I remember just being like, whatever, who is she? Because she wasn't big at the time, and I was very slowly sort of warmed up to her. I felt all the emotions. And by the time she was done, I was sobbing, I was laughing, I was standing on my feet, giving my first standing ovation. And by the end, I told my mom, that's what I'm going to do. So that was the beginning when I was a freshman in college.
Oh my gosh, how amazing. How great that your mom would realize, okay, Jennifer really needs a spark. And to get Joan Rivers of everyone to give you that spark. I actually saw her. I went to, remember, she was one of the first, well, now there are more, not that many, but late night hosts.
Yes.
Remember, I went to the Joan Rivers show and she was just amazing. So,
Yeah.
how great that your mom was so insightful,
Yeah.
to realize like, okay, Jennifer's lost her spark.
Yep.
So I'm sure there have been other times when you've kind of lost your spark or had self doubt. How have you handled that?
I've always been someone who is highly enthusiastic, but also incredibly empathetic. And so I feel all the feels, and when people say, just get over it or let it go, or, don't focus on that, I mean, that's an impossibility. And so I'm very ruled by my feelings. And there are lots of times that I lose that gusto and, that focus. And it's sometimes connected to my self-esteem. Sometimes it's connected to a failure, because I certainly have had lots of those in my life, but I think what always sort of keeps me going back and trying again, which is sort of what I'm known for, because I'm feisty and I'm a fighter, and dang it, I'm going to get there. I think it's always been my belief and hope that I'm here for something bigger than me. And I've learned that so many times when I have literally cheated death. I've found myself getting opportunities I was absolutely not prepared for. I found, myself in spaces where I should have been quitting and packing it up. And I have always had this sort of audacity that I'm here for something bigger than me, whatever that is, and that I have to keep going, and I'm just not willing to, I'm not willing to be sidelined. And I think that's sort of been a determining factor my whole life. I come from a family of 7 boys. And so that says a lot about who I am too. And I'm at the bottom of the list in terms of age, so I think that the fighting spirit was just always sort of in me.
So you're the only girl with 7 brothers and you're the youngest.
So they're not all brothers. Our 3 moms
Okay.
are sisters,
Okay.
and we are all within 4 or 5 years of each other. And we all were raised in the same community. So we're all sort of like puppies. We were always together. There wasn't a thing that we weren't all doing together. And so, yes, the only girl of all of those at the time, horrible boys.
Well, that's interesting that you say that because, and I want to come back to when you were talking about how you persevere and you have the audacity because you had to do that during COVID, like big time. But I love this thought because I have 2 older brothers. I was the only girl and the youngest, so I was the princess. But I grew up playing army men. you know, I kind of grew up being like that tomboy. And do you think, we're so influenced by how we're raised? How do you think being around those boys sort of has set you maybe be a little bit different because you are very girly now?
Yes. Yeah, I am. I think I was raised probably similarly to you. And I do have 2 brothers. And so I feel very similarly that I was raised with sports and army men, and I was definitely most comfortable in a tree. I was always playing sports, so I totally relate to all of that. And I think the way that it has served me throughout my entire life is that I have always sort of been comfortable with masculine energy. I'm comfortable being aggressive. I'm comfortable being competitive. I'm comfortable in environments where there are men. But you're right. I'm very much a girl's girl. I'm very much in touch with my femininity and liking things that tend to be traditionally, I guess, female, right? And so for me, I hit a point right around 40 where I needed to totally and completely expand my mindset around sort of that masculine feminine thing. And I just feel like it's all in me. It's in all of us, and if we really start to play with that, we realize that we have more feminine relationships. And what does that mean? It's that feminine energy of nurturing, of empathizing, of caretaking, and all of that. But when we have to fight, I mean, there's not a person on this planet that would look at a mama bear protecting her cubs and not say that female bear is too soft or too weak, right? Because we absolutely can be strong and we absolutely can be, competitive and all of that, but we can also be very sensitive and empathetic and nurturing. And it was almost like I hit 40 and I was like, wait, I'm all the things, and I just sort of unabashedly play with that. I had somebody recently tell me that I have BDE, and I think he was trying to sit me down and kind of calm me down, saying that my energy was too big and too male, in other words. And I don't take it. Like, yep, this is me. This is all of me. And I don't try to use it as a weapon, but I just recognize that I can be all the things.
Well, what I love about that too is as females, we normally have more or really high emotional intelligence,
Yeah,
which is powerful and makes for really good leaders. And you talk to a lot of leaders and you talk to a lot of female leaders. And what is it that you think that can set us apart and help us to sort of reach our full potential?
yeah. I love the idea of a women-led world. I love that. I think that women have proven to be extraordinarily wise and persistent and resilient and also empathetic and nurturing and kind and all of that. This is how we have seen communities run since the beginning of time, not just families, it's community as well. And there's a great book out that's called the Athena Doctrine. And what they did was they talked to tens of thousands of people in this study, and they asked them to look at lists of words. And when they looked at those lists of hundreds of words, they were asked to identify if they're male or female in their mind. Then they took that list of words and then they asked people to identify what they attributed to leadership qualities. And where this is going, the Athena Doctrine, right, is all about the findings that what people in the world want right now in their leaders are very innate female characteristics. It is that feminine spirit. It is, what we have led those communities and families by forever. And so I really feel strongly that I think that with all the problems in the world, that what's going to resolve them, whether we're talking about over here, over there, I think it's going to be the energy that comes from the feminine, not the energy that comes from the masculine.
Well, and I'm sure the people of New Zealand would agree with you because
Yes,
their prime minister, she's
absolutely.
amazing,
And our entire cabinet, right, is also
right?
incredible.
I know my daughters keep saying, we need to move there, mommy. Well, so I want to go back just a little bit and talk about how you pivoted in COVID because you were a keynote speaker. That was where you made your bread and butter, and then it came to a screeching halt.
Sure
And,
did.
a lot of people out there, keynote speaking is not their business, but they might be feeling, like they just want to stay under the covers, or they're just like, for whatever reason, I don't have a passion for life. I've hit a point, I'm in my midlife. I have so many things pulling at me that I just don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
So, do you mind talking how you personally overcame that? I'm sure it wasn't easy. And if you have any advice for the listeners out there who might be having a hard time, getting off their sofa.
Yeah, gosh, I can relate to everything you're saying because there were times I didn't want to get off my sofa and there were times I didn't want to peek my head out of the covers. Yeah, my entire business was decimated overnight, right? Because I had events that were scheduled, big in-person events where you've got tens of thousands of people for 2 years, for 2020 and 2021. So everything it was literally like watching these dominoes fall, week after week. They just kept pulling out. And so I lost 2 years of business within the first month of COVID. And it was devastating because everything I do is from stage. And I've been doing this as a keynote speaker for 24 years. So you can imagine all of my clients, future clients, come from those audiences too. So all of a sudden, everything just came to a screeching halt. And I went through the pain. I went through the worry and all of that. But ultimately, I've got this concept that I talk about, which is deep bravery. And it's when it's more than just needing to be brave and speak up. It's when the rubber meets the road and you've got a decision that will either make or break you. It's that monumental. And I knew that the way I was doing things, it was over and it wasn't going to get back to normal for a while. And so I really needed to figure out, how can I do this differently? And so the first thing I did was I contacted all of my clients. Luckily, a lot of these people I've known for 20 years, and I offered them free training for the rest of the year. As long as we were in quarantine, they could get free training and free coaching for all of their employees. And the thing is, I was busy every day, but I didn't make $1 for the entire remainder of the year from mid-March until the end of the year. I didn't make a penny. And so that was a scary thing, but I knew that I was planting the right seeds, but I also had to get deeper than that. And this is where the bravery came in. I needed to figure out a different way to structure my business because everything I do is based on me being somewhere, me actually showing up. And even when I was doing these free trainings online, there are only so many hours in the day. And so it had to be me. So I decided to go deep into learning. And I would spend 15, 16, 17 hours a day, whether I was working or after hours into the wee hours of the night, learning. I'm a creative. I am, an extrovert. And I found myself sort of knee deep in this introvert space where I was having to learn technology. And I mean, deeply learn technology, how to create content, how to edit, how to use sound and lighting, how to use platforms to be able to create a universe where people can learn and be a part of what I do, app creation, website creation, all of the things that I'd never done. And I knew that if I didn't do this, I'd be in trouble. And it took me until January to launch it all. And I did. And my life has completely changed. But I knew that it wasn't going to get back to normal in person. I knew I needed to make some money, right? It was great that I did this. But now all of those people who I had invested in, who I truly care about them and their business, are now just consuming all of this new world stuff that I'd pivoted into. And, all the stuff I always said, I can't do that. That's not me. I'll never be that type of person. I became her. And now it's thriving, which is really exciting.
Well, what's really exciting too, though, Jen, is you do find deep bravery, and you do really invest in people, and you have such a heart to help other women. I know you help a lot of people, but women in particular, that has been a big proponent for you. And so I'm not surprised that it would come back twofold for you.
Thank you.
Because you also have a nonprofit organization.
I do.
So how did that come about?
Yeah, that was another moment of deep bravery. I'll tell you, I was coming home from the holidays with family out of state. We had driven 15 hours and I'd gotten home and my phone blew up. Here I'm like getting into my pajamas and all of that. My phone was literally lighting up like crazy. I thought, what in the world? And finally, I was trying to ignore it, but it just kept going. And I looked and I realized that I was being contacted by lots of people within my community saying, we need help now. We need help now. And ultimately, we have had in Arizona a big crisis on the border for years. I mean, decades, right? I mean, this has been going on forever, where we have people who are escaping very, very dangerous situations in their home countries, right? So they're coming from the triangle in South America and all the way up to Mexico. And so these people were fleeing. And the problem was there was nobody to help. And it was all over the news, apparently, but I've been traveling. And I know I had heard whispers of it, but I didn't know it had gotten so bad. And so people were saying to me in these text messages, we need people to come down to this church right now and help. There are people that are going to be left on the street if you don't come help. And I was like, what the heck? I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with refugees. Like, what does this even mean? So I threw on a sweatshirt over my pajamas and some slip-on tennis shoes. And I drove down to this church and got there like 10:30 at night. And there were hundreds of people everywhere. And someone walked up to me and they were like, are you here for a family? And I was like, two. I don't even know why I said two families. And I left there with two families to take in for the night. And after dropping them off at the airport and after spending all of these hours with them, I remember there was one father who he was very quiet. He was an elderly guy. Elderly, I'm guessing he was a dad of a 12-year-old, but he was probably in his late 60s. So there was a big age gap between this man and his son. And the son was super smart and super, talkative and all of that. But the dad never said a word. And so I figured, there was a language barrier there, and that's okay. And I'm trying to Google translate my way through it, whatever. But the father would just kind of nod and smile, would never say anything. So after being with them about 16 hours, I dropped the first family off at the airport, and then I was dropping this man and his son off. And I hugged the little boy, and, of course, I'm crying. And then the father grabbed my face and with two hands, and he said to me in perfect English, with an accent, of course, he said, I love you, lady.
Wow.
And I was in. And it was from that moment on that I realized, after being in corporate America as, a trainer and working in leadership and all of that, and then spending 20 years working as a consultant in these huge global brands, I knew that I could help. And so I that day went home and I literally created a nonprofit and started calling everybody I knew and said, we can do this. And I started getting in touch with churches, getting in touch with the government, where I have lots of contacts. And before you knew it, we were helping people, and we have we've helped aid 48,000 people.
Wow.
And
that's just incredible, Jen. I'm so sorry, but that is just amazing. I mean, that is from being in your pajamas to, and I love that about you, because you are such a doer. You're somebody who's like, okay, you see something and you're like, I'm going to do something about this. And I heard you speak, and speaking of talking about being a doer, there were politicians that needed help with their speeches.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you started helping them with their message. How did that happen?
Well, it's so let me just say that I live my life from this like wacky place of yes, because I told you, I'm just, there's an audacity that I'm here to do something while I'm here. And so I had gotten very involved in doing this aid work with the asylum seekers and working directly with ICE. And so when these people would come through, ICE would contact me to have my organization take them in. So all of a sudden, I've now got politicians that I need to be working with, right, to be able to help them make the best decisions for these families, right? And so as it turns out, I just started making all of these contacts. And then before I knew it, the news was coming around and there were papers, national, articles being written and all of that. And so it was kind of a bizarre sort of expansion of what was happening. My little world was becoming a little bit bigger in that nonprofit space. And so I was asked to be a chief of staff for a US congressional candidate. And then I was asked to be another chief of staff and then a third chief of staff. Now I'm working with a woman that's out of Georgia running for US Senate. So I've had this chance to work on campaigns with candidates. And all of a sudden, one day it just dawned on me, why am I not marrying these two? Like I love being a part of community and helping make things happen, right? Instead of sitting on the sideline being angry and screaming at a television, I'd rather like actually be a part of it and do something. And so all of a sudden it dawned on me that I've been a professional speaker forever. That's never stopped. I've got this world that I really feel responsible for as a member of society to be actively engaged in. What am I missing here? And that's how it began. That it was just, I had all these contacts, I had worked on these campaigns, and I think people saw that I was committed to doing good things in the community, and so they trusted me already. And that's how that started. So I don't actually speech write, but what I do is I help people with their stump speeches, with their presentation skills, how to pivot when they are asked a difficult question, storytelling, how to make sure that they are at least perceived as accessible, even if they're really not, because that's a thing, right? So yeah.
Well, what I love about Jen, you're so multi-talented, and you have so much energy and you come from a place of service, which is incredible. And it just comes out in you. If someone is listening to this right now and they've kind of gotten to a place in midlife where they've tried a few things, had some successes, but right now they're feeling a little overwhelmed because, I'm a perfect example of being a sandwich generation. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and my parents are in their 80s, and I'm 52. So, my energy level isn't the same as when I was 42. So if there is someone out there listening right now who is like, okay, Jen is inspiring me, but I just don't know where to start. Like, I'm not sure, like, what are my talents? And, I don't have contacts for politicians. What would you say to them on just how do they get started?
I think the most important thing I could tell anyone is start to play with what you love, play with what makes you happy. Pay attention to where you lose time. There are things that we all do that we're like, holy cow, I've been doing this for 2 hours. For instance, if I'm watching the dodo on what am I trying to say? Facebook, all the dog rescues and all of that. All of a sudden, the next thing I know, an hour and a half is gone. Like there are things that you love that you lose time on. You can't believe it's gone. Start playing with that. Start playing with, what is it that you love? What lights your soul on fire? Because that's when it truly doesn't feel like work. It feels like you're following your calling, right? And for me, my calling is very much in inspiring, has been since I was little. It's in helping. I've always wanted to help. And it's been in, community service and volunteerism and that kind of thing. So I feel like I get to play in these areas that bring me not only satisfaction, but money to live, right? And so I think that it's important that we play a little bit with what brings us joy. You can get paid for writing. You can get paid for helping others. You can get paid for reviewing things that have been purchased, for goodness sakes, right? You can get paid for reviewing restaurants. You can get paid for doing the strangest things these days. And what I want you to realize is that it doesn't have to look like the typical 9 to 5 grind. It doesn't have to look like changing careers or going in a totally different direction. It can start out as play, doing the things that you love. And before you know it, you've got money coming in and you're loving it and you have boundless energy, because that's what happens when we get to play with the things that we love and that inspire us. Your energy is amplified. I mean, magnified, right? Multiplied, because you're getting to do what you love. So that would be the best advice.
Well, I love that because we don't play enough. We could sort of forget about playing. And I'm constantly reminded by my 10-year-old and my 12-year-old, like, oh yeah, that's right. That they can play for hours, and so I would love to welcome people to get in contact with you to find out more about you. And how can they do that?
I am on every social media platform at Jen Buck Speaks. JenBuck Speaks, like I'm speaking to you now. Jen Buck Speaks, literally every platform. And my website is jenbuckspeaks.com. So I'm totally accessible and available. I respond to everybody. And I'm out there.
Oh, that is so great. Well, I'm really excited. Thank you again so much. I cannot believe how quickly time has flown.
I know.
But I loved having you on, Jen. And thank you so much for everything that you're doing, especially for us women. It's just great.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.